You know the feeling. All of you who love what you do every single day. Yeah, that feeling. The feeling of being unbeatable, unstoppable, of overcoming the impossible, cutting like a hot knife through butter, with complete freedom of movement, light as a feather, like that first embrace, spending time with the one you love on an early morning of a day full of promises, absolute control, in command every step of the way, with a chainsaw that handles like a dream, an extension of your skill, smooth and effortless motion, ready for whatever you throw its way. A feeling of complete trust, peace of mind, safe in the knowledge that your equipment will keep you performing on top of your game, no matter what. That special feeling, a better feeling, the feeling of being able to do anything you set your mind to. Yeah, that feeling. That's the feeling of a Husqvarna chainsaw.
Hello and welcome, everybody. I'm Kiah Martin, the climate correspondent and Husqvarna H-Team member, and I'm so pleased to have you all join with us today. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands of Tasmania, where I'm presenting from this evening, and also traditional owners across Australia, all the regions that people are joining us. And I'd like to pay my respect to Aboriginal elders, past and present. For the webinar, please feel free to introduce yourself using the chat function and tell us where you're joining us from. Please also use that chat box for any questions you have during the presentation, and hopefully we'll have time. We'll have a Q&A session at the end. So as part of this webinar, attendees will go into the draw to win one of 3 Husqvarna gear packs valued at over $580. So stay tuned until the end. In celebration of Husqvarna's recent announcement of 2 new chainsaws entering the global market, we are shining the spotlight on Husqvarna chainsaws with a behind-the-scenes look at Husqvarna chainsaw manufacturing. We'll also take an inside look at the development and features of the 2 new saws to market, and a brief focus on what we can look forward to in terms of rollout of these new saws, particularly for the Australian and New Zealand markets. If you're already abreast of industry news, you'll know that Husqvarna have just launched their brand new fuel-injected chainsaw, the 564 XP, alongside their largest battery chainsaw yet in the 550i XP. This global launch got me thinking about Husqvarna chainsaws in general and the evolution of the category over time. And I wanted to discuss this with a Husqvarna expert and find out a bit more about these new saws at the same time. So what better person to talk to than Gent Simmons, Husqvarna Senior Vice President of Global Product Management and Development. And Gent is a key player in the Husqvarna Group, and he is joining us from Husqvarna in Sweden. Welcome, Gent, and thank you for making the time to talk to us.
Thank you. Good morning from Sweden. Thanks for having me.
Good morning. Good morning. Gent, I'd be really happy for you to share with us a little bit about your journey with Husqvarna, if you don't mind, and how you came to be the Senior Vice President of your area.
Yeah, and how I came to be in Sweden as well. You probably recognize the accent isn't Swedish.
Absolutely.
But, yeah, I'm 26 years with the company, so more or less my entire adult life. You know, I've been with Husqvarna. I've got it in the blood for sure. But started in our offices in Charlotte, North Carolina. Sales and marketing is where I began my journey, and I had a big passion for the products. Kind of became known on the sales team in the U.S. as kind of one of the product guys, and then I decided to make a foray into product training. Went for a couple of years, actually about 3 years. So I was the national training manager, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. But then I wanted to get more into actually influencing the way forward, and so I just started to push myself into the product management space. And that was probably around 2006, 7, 8, somewhere in there. And without going through every step in the journey, the rest, as they say, is history. I got into the product management team. And in 2016, I was asked to come to Sweden to take over product management for our chainsaws, just to get a different perspective into the team. So we take kind of the, plenty of perspectives from the Swedish, organization and deep engineering knowledge, and of course the European and Nordic, work, but to insert a little bit of the American application knowledge and thinking. I think the idea was to balance the team in a good way, and I guess we were somewhat successful, because eventually they pushed me into the senior vice president role, which is fantastic. But at the same time, I sure do miss the hands-on stuff. But that's a little bit of my background, I guess. Yeah.
Well, it's a long and fascinating career. I understand the hands-on and missing that aspect of this industry, but certainly you're in a very good position to augment what's happening in industry, and we're very grateful for all the good people in at the top there. So thank you so much for sharing.
Thanks.
Okay, Gent. Well, I wanted to start out this evening by picking your brain a little on the behind the scenes of chainsaw manufacturing at Husqvarna. And I know the factory in Sweden, along with other Husqvarna factories around the world, have been producing chainsaws since 1959, starting with the very first model, the Husqvarna 90. Are you able to give our viewers a behind the scenes perspective of what's involved with chainsaw manufacturing and the new chainsaw accessories now being produced out of Sweden?
Yeah, I think focusing on maybe my space, which is the research and development side.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd be happy to take you through some of how we do that. Actually, it always starts with the customer. And you mentioned the 90. I mean, even the stories there are kind of fascinating. That we in the 1950s, late 50s, we started to kind of go into looking at the forestry business and to get a full perspective on the customer's needs. The engineers back in the late 50s actually went to different parts of the world, like Alaska, to get that full perspective on what a forestry logging chainsaw, how it should be designed for different applications and different needs. So even at the very beginning, that 90 you talked about, I mean, we were taking in customer information from all over the world, for that product.
Yep. So
we do the same thing today. We have a product management organization that works closely with our business units, like, for example, our Pacific unit that we're, of course, working with today. Collect a lot of information there, but what you might, and that's probably the answer that everybody expected in some ways, but what you probably don't think about is that in my organization, I like to crash our advanced development team, which are the people that are kind of the deep engineering nerds, looking way out in the future. What are the new materials? What's the new technologies? What's coming from the technology perspective? Crash that into the product management organization, looking at the customer perspective, and then try to, from that, mold what's really the right way forward. Because if just the engineers did it, it would be a super high-tech product that might not meet the application needs. But vice versa, if we just look at what the customer's current knowledge is, we might miss what's right around the corner in the technology space. So I like to kind of crash those teams together in a healthy way to come up with the right optimal designs. So that's kind of the starting point of how this goes. As we move into the project and when we choose the way forward, we have these kind of high-level design principles. And of course, there's thousands of different design guidelines, but high-level design principles: reliability, performance, maneuverability. That's kind of the essence of the Husqvarna DNA. What is the most reliable layout, combination of technology features, etc.? What's the highest performing we can get out of that layout? And then what's the maximum maneuverability or ergonomics, ease of use that we can get? And again, there's a tree of thousands of things underneath each of those three. But if we can scope the project around those three and really get the right balance of those three: reliability, performance, maneuverability. And by the way, that's RPM. We do that on purpose. Yeah. If we get that right balance, then we've done the right thing. So at a very high level, I think that's from the R&D and product management standpoint, that's how we scope a project, how we get something going, and how we lay out what we call market user requirements, around those key principles.
Excellent. I like that the Husqvarna DNA is RPM. I think that's absolutely classic.
Yeah, I came up with that, by the way. I'm taking credit for that.
Oh, definitely. That one's yours for sure. I was just thinking about the chainsaw accessories as well, and just in terms of perhaps the chain factory there. I know that's a recently new addition, probably in the last decade. That would kind of fall under the same umbrella.
Yeah, in the R&D space, we do have a different R&D team that works on that, but it's all under what we call our core customer solution unit, or which is really a product management and development organization. So everybody is working in different R&D areas, but underneath that same umbrella, which is actually quite good, because then we have everybody working in some ways cross-functionally together in the design. And in the recent years, really, you're right, that the chain factory's kind of been started up about 10 years ago. But really, from a design standpoint, it was the last 5 years or so that we started to really bring in the chain experts, I should really say the cutting equipment experts, alongside of the engine design, or the battery system engineering teams, and really start putting everybody together to try to maximize the design around the full ecosystem.
Exactly.
Which also includes actually digital. We started to bring those people in as well in the last 5 years or so, to look at how does all this work together. And it actually has changed some of how we design. Instead of just maximizing the engine or the motors, or the layout, around the traditional methods, when you actually say, well, we're going to design this optimal for a 3/8 chisel chain, out of our factory, then you can trim the engine in just the right way, to make it really optimized for that layout. So I think it's actually changed a lot of how we do things in R&D.
I think that's excellent, and also, I mean, that's great insight as well in terms of actually putting the brand new Husqvarna chains with these new saws, and it's actually a great lead in to my questions. So it's really good background, and knowing, I suppose, that we've got 2 brand new saws to market. Basically, I've put together a series of questions for you just regarding the launch of the 564 XP, the fuel-injected petrol saw, and the 550 IXP, the big battery. So firstly, let's start with the new battery chainsaw, the 550 IXP. Okay. So my first question is, what key market needs or tree industry feedback drove the development of this saw? So it's kind of a nice lead in from what you were just talking about.
Yeah, the 550 IXP from its start is a tree care landowner inspired or designed saw. Of course, it also fits this kind of like classic 50cc classification. It's funny how I think forever, at least the rest of my career, we're still going to refer to battery segments as CC segments. We just can't give up the petrol blood.
Yeah, well, it makes sense to everyone though.
Yeah. So we have that class of saw, but I think we are starting to break the mold a little bit and say, instead of just going for these classic classifications, what's the real application need for battery in that space? And that space, and of course, there's hundreds of different applications, but the core applications is tree care, professional tree care, and landowner use in certain parts of the world. Certain parts of the world, landowners aren't going to be using batteries. Certain parts of the world say they will.
Indeed.
So that's kind of the core of what's inspired the layout and the design, and why we made some of the decisions that we made was to really make sure we get the right saw for tree care and landowner use.
Excellent. Well, I guess in terms of that particular saw and its, I suppose, upgrade to a bigger CC, let's just say it, a bigger CC platform, can you elaborate a bit more on the specific technological advancements in the model, like compared to previous Husqvarna battery chainsaws?
Yeah, And there it is at the high level again. If we just use the RPM again, and it might sound a little bit like going too far with that in a ways, but it really is something I hammer on, for our design teams, as well as when we talk about our products with our customers, to kind of focus on these elements. So if you think about it from a reliability standpoint, I think one of the big changes here with the 550, I'm really proud of the team of how they came up with a really great HMI, a human machine interface, the graphical display. It's really world class, and it does fit the reliability space beyond our traditional battery saws because it gives so much good feedback, to the operator. Of course, before we had the blinking light that, would say, hey, your chain brake's on.
Yes.
But now you've got a real clear graphical display about what that, instead of just a blinking light, what does it really mean? So you understand better. It's a more reliable interaction with the customer, more reliable user experience. But that's just one of like 10 plus things that now you can clearly see on a screen, on the saw. You get motor temperature. You can get battery temperature warnings. You have an oil sensor so that you don't run out of chain oil, and it's very clearly displayed, and a number of other things. So you really get that good, a much better interaction with the saw, which hopefully also gives you heads up when the saw might need to be serviced, or you want to change your operation pattern so that it becomes a longer lasting product for you.
And what
So
about
that's
the battery development there, Gent? Like in terms of the options for two larger batteries in this saw, and that's something new that we haven't seen before in terms of that little bit extra power.
Yeah, and that would fit into the performance, side. So great setup for me, thank you. So how do we optimize performance? And I think that's exactly what you're talking about. We have the B540 battery, which was, and back to system engineering, by the way, that B540 battery was designed around this chainsaw. Now, of course, the B540 can be used in other products. But the real system that we put together, we started the project at the same time. What's the best battery for the design of this chainsaw, and vice versa. So with the B540, we have the most powerful battery chainsaw that we've ever produced, 3.4 kilowatts. So you get a lot of power. We have, of course, our classic to us. We have our pass-through design. So the battery, it's a larger battery, but it fits through the body of the saw. So you get the batteries balanced, in the balancing the weight of the saw. You don't have it sticking up out or hanging below. It's through the body of the saw. So you get the good balance, a lot of power. But if you want a better combination for a little bit lower power, but the better weight distribution, say, for example, if you're climbing, with it to do blocking or whatever, then you can, or even the limbing application, then you can switch to the B330 battery, again, a little less power, 2.5 kilowatts, but you'll have a lot less weight. So you get a better weight distribution. So from a performance standpoint, that's one of the big areas that we focused on. How do we get good battery to product optimization, with it? And then lastly, if we hit the M, the maneuverability piece, especially versus our competitors, I think the team has done a fantastic job with getting the layout right. So it's the 3.4 kilowatt high power 50 cc class battery saw, but it's in a small package. It's very smooth design. We do that so that the saw doesn't get hung on your kit or get hung on branches or in the limbing application or in the tree. You've got a streamlined body, and of course we get the weight as low as possible. It's got one of the best power to weight ratios in the industry, so it's very maneuverable as well. So those are some of the things I guess I would call out.
That's great. I guess with the 330, you have that option to reduce that weight to maximize maneuverability as well. So that's excellent. I think a lot of people are very excited to see this saw come to market. So looking forward to it. So how does this particular saw, the 550 IXP, contribute to Husqvarna's sustainability goals?
Oh, that's a good question. Of course, it's a battery saw. So from a CO2, from an emission standpoint, from start at usage phase, it's of course better than a petrol saw. So you have definitely a less CO2 impact. Then I would say that from a design standpoint, our battery saws are just like our petrol saws, and we design them for maximum serviceability.
Yeah.
So every part of that product, that chainsaw, should be serviceable, which means it's a circular product. So the repairability, circularity, keeping it running as long as possible, not having to replace it, being able to fix it and change out components versus having to replace the whole product. And that's also part of sustainability. And then finally, I would also say that this might be a bit of a soft way into sustainability, but I truly believe it in my heart, is that the more that we can do to support and advance the tree care industry, and for that matter, sustainable forestry, the better we are pushing the whole industry forward and the world forward into better into a more sustainable world, endorsing and advancing like biodiversity in our urban forests. The more that tree care is adopted around the world, the more that we take care of our urban forests, the more we reduce CO2 levels in cities. We get more canopy in cities in the summer times. We bring more wildlife back into the cities. So it's probably a kind of a way around your question, but I really believe if we're supporting and advancing the tree care community with any of our products, we are, in essence, a more sustainable company as well. And by the way, those are our three sustainability pillars in Husqvarna: reduce CO2, which includes petrol, by the way. We have a lot of projects going on to reduce CO2 and petrol as well.
Naturally.
So CO2 reduction, circularity, and drive circularity in the industry, and increase levels of biodiversity around the world. Those are actually our three. So I weave those in for you.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, they're definitely resource smart solutions, the battery products, and they're very popular in Australia and around the world. So I think this will particularly garner a lot of attention once it's released here. So what are the key features? We've seen some of them there, but what are the key features of the 550 IXP, and which industry user groups do you think the saw is best suited for? Obviously, you've said professionals and landowners.
Yeah.
They're the two particular groups that this saw is targeted to?
That's right, tree care and landowner. Now, of course, there's definitely going to be some applications around the world that will, can use it. Obviously, it's not just for those customers, but that's how we designed it.
Yeah, so I guess it's sort of professional climbing and on-ground tree work and.
Yeah, and specific to that, we put teams on. Of course, there's the groundwork environment and tree care, which goes without saying, with a rear handle saw like this. But for like blocking, we actually did spend some time, of course, with our customers, understanding what the needs are when it comes to in removals, blocking.
Yeah.
And then there were some design elements that went into that, working in the tree limbs and things. And then, of course, you've got the maneuverability of the landowner that's doing some limbing applications and bucking applications as well.
Absolutely.
Didn't really go after the true logging forestry design elements.
We might have another saw a bit later to talk about with that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we'll save that one for then. Actually, if you go back on the previous slide you had up there was a couple interesting on that walk around. So if you've got it, maybe just a couple things to point out. I've mentioned most of this at a high level already, but I think interesting is that state of power that is worth mentioning. Back to the HMI, the user experience, how you interact with the product. We've taken some big steps in really giving you a real view of what your state of power is, or state of charge. Where before, you had the lights, you still have the lights, but it was more of a software algorithm. But now the product and the batteries really talking to one another. You get a really good and more specific view of how much battery you have left. So if you're up in the tree and you're making blocking cuts and you're rigging and everything, and you want to know, do I really have enough power to get the job done? You get a much better readout on that. There's also something on here worth. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Oh, no, go on. I was just going to say, and it's kind of key, just in terms of a saw this big, blocking down, you're going to actually chew through quite a bit of battery quite quickly, putting the whole bar through some significant size trunk wood. So I think that's going to be pretty critical.
Exactly. Yeah. Also, the start mode memory, I think, is an advancement that's unique to this product from our previous. There's multiple settings you can have with the saw, and instead of every time you have to restart the saw, reset those settings. The saw actually is going to remember your settings. It's like getting into your car and all the settings being exactly the same. It's the same thing here. You have a certain way you want to run it. It's gonna set that way and have that memory every time you start the saw.
That's a neat feature. That's a really neat feature. That's something we haven't seen before.
Yeah, exactly. It's new for us. And then maybe the final thing I'll call out just to add a little bit to some of the advancements that the team has come up with. I really like their on the service side. I really like what they come up with the filtration, the air filtration system, because we've got to move air through that body to cool the EC or the MCU. We got to cool the motor. We've got to cool the battery, especially. So air comes in from the side, moves across the battery, and then out the top of the saw. Well, that's going to bring in a lot of dust and debris, and if that debris gets into the components in there, the air doesn't move as well. You get some heat buildup.
Yeah.
So there has to be an air filtration system. So the side cover is easily removable. All you got to do is just knock it out, and then you put it back on. You're off to go again. Versus some of our competitors that either don't have a air filtration system, so you get debris getting up inside there, or they've got a more traditional petrol style where you got to open the machine up to actually get to an air filter on the inside. I think it's a really simple, but it's actually a really trick way of being able to have air filtration and easily clean it at the same time. So it's a small thing, but it's actually kind of a big thing.
That's good. That's good. And we haven't seen that before either. So be keen to see how that actually goes in Australian conditions with some of those dense hardwoods. That's excellent. That's really good information. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Let's see. So what kind of field testing, I suppose, in terms of this saw, bringing it to market, having a launch, what kind of field testing and quality assurance processes would be implemented during development? And I'm sort of thinking a little bit about the H-Team there as well, in terms of, maybe you'd like to talk a little more about product testing at the H-Team camps and how this is unique to Husqvarna. That might be a good place to talk about it.
Sure. I think the best way to start is going to be if we just go to the beginning, and that's where H-Team comes in. H-Team is not just a testing entity, of course. Our ambassadors, are really part of the early stages of the product as well. So we want to get the feedback in the early stages so that from a design standpoint, and of course this in some ways leads into the quality of the product, is to make sure we've got the right design that meets the needs of the customer. I will be very transparent with you and say that we take both the highly experienced H-Team members feedback in, and we take some of the mid to low level feedback, because not everybody's an H-Team caliber. So we need to find the middle ground.
Yeah, the industry is very diverse.
Exactly. But H-Team really comes in the beginning, and then also as we get to the camps, we of course, and some of our field testers are also H-Team members. Different, not all, but we choose different products, different H-Team members for different testing elements. But they, of course, get in the testing phase and give us feedback of what they're seeing in their usage. But beyond that, we also have quite extensive laboratory testing. And this actually goes, by the way, for both the battery saw as well as for the petrol saw. And maybe a comment there. We test our battery saws on the durability side. We test our battery saws to the same kind of extreme standards that we test our petrol saws. So we don't do like a lighter duty job of the durability testing on battery, even though some people believe that. Of course, there's different tests that we do, a motor versus an engine, but the durability side has to be the same.
Yes.
But we have laboratory testing, everything from climate testing. We run it in the extreme cold conditions to extreme heat condition over hundreds of hours. We have endurance testing, which is under load testing in the labs, and we have like start-stop testing, which is really hard on the machines. Constant start, constant stop. But we get hundreds and hundreds of hours of laboratory testing before we bring it to field, and then we have field testers around the world. We have 5 different climate zones and regions around the world that we'd like to do field testing in, just to get different usage, different application types, different climate types. And that usually comes in the last year of the heavy field testing comes in the last year of the product development. So, and of course we have a quality team that's always chasing me and reminding me to always meet our quality standards too. So that helps as well.
100%. Yeah, and I think that field testing that's global is actually critical because you'll realize in a particular environment like maybe Africa that you'll have completely different conditions than you would in Finland, and you've got to be able to, I suppose, get everything right for all operators that are going to buy this saw. So it's good to know that that's a really thorough process, and certainly knowing that the H-Team is in early. I think that's a great thing for people to know as well, that there's people working in industry day in, day out that are actually looking at these saws from a field testing and quality assurance perspective. So I think it's a great.
And so I don't forget, and this is a bit, maybe it's a segue into the next talk, the 564. But since you brought up Africa, I feel like I need to mention that one of the revelations we've had in the last few years. Maybe the last 5 years, came from some of our testers in South Africa. And we actually have it employed and built into some of our saws now, and we have it on the 564 as well, but that's the magnetic insert into our fuel filters, our fuel filter line.
Yes.
The South African, sorry?
Yeah, I think that's something that comes in the 564, is that right?
Yeah, exactly. And what we found in South Africa is that there was a lot of metal in the soil, which of course in windy conditions gets into the bark, into the trees, and we were picking up all these little bits of metal and iron that was clogging up our filters, and also getting into our auto tune and our electronics and really messing up the little small valves in the carburetors and stuff. But that putting a magnet in the fuel line was able, it collects, it kind of grabs all that metal so that it cleans it out before the fuel goes into the carburetor. And that came from some of the testing and some of the testers we had in South Africa. So yes, a lot of testing is done, but man, do we also learn a lot about future designs from having these great people around the world that are working in these different climates and different environments. It's so important.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And sort of stuff that we don't really know as end users, but it's really great to hear it from you, and particularly for the people joining. To hear that's something that Husqvarna is really committed to. So, all right, well, we've sort of mentioned the 564. Let's move on to that now, as I know there'll probably be a ton of interest in this new petrol product. So, Husqvarna hasn't had any previous chainsaws with fuel injection capabilities. What challenges did the design team face with the development of this saw?
We had a few.
I imagine they would have been a lot.
Yeah, we had a few. Of course, again, just like with the 550 we talked about, and I bring it up again, we started off with this RPM high level, view of things, and how do you really maximize? We get the most reliability, the most performance, and the best maneuverability. So it's a balancing act. I mean, you can make something that's super maneuverable, but maybe isn't as powerful, or high performing. So you can make something that's super high performing, but maybe isn't as reliable. So you've always got to find the balance. So in the early research, I mean, we again, crashing my advanced development team into my product team, we started out with some really interesting concepts around some new materials that could be used to get the weight even lower, to get the speeds even faster. And a lot of that started to come into the project. From a performance standpoint, of course, we wanted the We really wanted to go after this all-around saw, which is the 60 cc. That's a real sweet spot. It's kind of a bridge between really all three major customer applications: landowners, foresters in certain part of the world, and tree care. So we really wanted to get the right balance, of performance, for those customer types. And then, of course, we have the maneuverability. How can we make it as small as possible, as compact as possible, the least amount of gyroscopics as possible? And we set off on we chose a path. We set off on that path. And I have to say that about halfway through the project, we were a bit off the rails. And I rarely get personally involved in projects anymore, but I had to spend a couple months really personally involved with this project, because what we started to discover, it sounds like such a small thing, but the injector placement, we chose the placement for the fuel injector based on the most optimal performance we could possibly get. But unfortunately, that was, as we tested it further in the layouts, we realized it was hurting us a bit on the reliability side. We weren't getting as good of where it was placed. We weren't getting as good of airflow around the engine. And also the injector, the angle it was coming in at wasn't giving us quite as good of fuel flow into the engine as we wanted. So we were kind of violating our rules on the reliability side. So we made the decision in the project actually to move the injectors. This is halfway through the project. You don't want to be moving stuff like injectors halfway through a project. But we spent a little bit of extra money. We took a little extra time in the project, which means we delayed it a little bit longer in order to move the injector to a better position, to get air moving better around the engine, and also to get the optimal fuel flow into the engine. So again, I'm a bit in the nerd space there, but it was actually just moving an injector a little bit on the engine was a pretty major challenge that we had halfway through the project. But I'm glad we did it, because I think we got the right balance again of that reliability, performance, and maneuverability that our customers are looking for. And really, it's a super small change from the customer side, but a major change when you're talking about engine design.
Yeah.
So
indeed.
that's my story. I have trauma over that those days.
I imagine that would be a lot of roundtable discussions and things like that.
Yeah, exactly.
I guess just in terms of the final design coming through, and I was just hoping you might be able to elaborate on some, I suppose, specific technological advancements in this model compared to previous Husqvarna petrol chainsaws. Obviously, fuel injection, but is there anything outside of that that's different to other petrol saws?
Yeah, we've got a few of them on the screen here. I'll just rattle off what comes to mind first, and then maybe refer back to some of what you put on the screen. But the ability for, and it's a little bit in the marketing materials, so it sounds like kind of a marketing claim, but it really is a major advancement for us that we've got a 60 cc chainsaw. That's really the size. I mean, the footprint is more like a 50 cc, but yet you've got the power that's up against where the 70 cc's usually are. So, I mean, LPFI aside, and LPFI, by the way, low pressure fuel injection, I mean, it helped us achieve this, of course, a major part of how we achieved it. But we're really absolutely the team achieved what I really wanted to see come from this in the beginning, is not just to do an LPFI because we should, but because our competition's, doing stuff like this. It wasn't about that. It was about how do we get the best saw that blends the tree care needs, the landowner needs, and the forestry needs. And typically a 60 cc, it is in the middle, but it's all in the past, it's a bit suboptimized sometimes. It's a little stuck in the middle. But now that we've got that small package with the power, I think we could, if it's embraced in this kind of thinking, we could really change the industry and say, now you've got one saw that can do groundwork for tree care and forestry work for half of the world, and also be a great all-around saw for a landowner. So not a specific technical feature or specification I'm talking about there, but a blend of those specifications really we really hit the sweet spot with the design, I think. But beyond that, of course, LPFI, low pressure fuel injection, you get that fantastic acceleration that is needed in most all the applications, be it from limbing or tree care usage. It's also more fuel efficient using LPFI and less components. It gives you that smaller footprint. You can see the picture on the back on the screen here. You get that kind of sloped back end because you don't have the carburetor box as big, because the injector takes up a lot less space. So you do get that small design that we're looking for out of LPFI. So kind of a side benefit in a way. The starting is, I mean, it's groundbreaking, with LPFI. You don't have the choke system. You've got to really just push the purge bulb, pull the cord. That's all you got to do. So probably one of our most simple starting machines we've ever had. I shouldn't say probably, it is actually the simplest starting machine we've ever had. And speaking of some breakthroughs that we've come across in the design, it has the lowest vibration levels we've ever tested on a chainsaw. Now, how it gets certified, because of the certification standards, we'll see what the final numbers are. But I can just tell you from our own laboratories, we've never had vibration levels as low as this chainsaw. So that's a huge breakthrough for us as well.
They're excellent points. I think you've actually covered off more than I thought you would there. And I
okay.
see some
well, that's good.
Questions popping
I still
up
got it.
Right and center there as well. You still got it.
What else is on the screen here? Yeah, compact engine and control unit. Yeah, that's small for the body and also easy to cool. Simple start. We talked about that.
Yes.
Improved serviceability. Connects into both our saws will connect into our service hub so our dealers can easily do diagnostics on it and troubleshooting. One advancement here is that the service hub is improved. So that it's got more features to it, more specific features, so you can dial in really on if there's a problem with the saw. And of course, it's upgraded for LPFI. You also don't have to unplug a cord to plug it in. You can there's actually a tail that's specifically made for service hub, so it's easier to service. Gravity casted cylinder is a little bit more robust than a high pressure injection system. Two-piece crankshaft is also something we haven't been doing in the past. We usually do a three-piece crankshaft. The two-piece crankshaft is a little more robust. Less pieces means less opportunity for failure. And the muffler sounds like a small thing, but it is the lightweight muffler. I'm actually less impressed with with my team on the lightweight muffler. I'm more impressed on how they were able to position it further back on the body of the saw, so it's less exposed for damage. And that's kind of a layout thing that we were able to achieve with the saw. So it's good that it's lightweight. Super good that we're able to do the layout of the engine in a way that moves the muffler a little bit away from areas that can damage it. So now I've gone too far. So please pull me out, Kiah.
That's good. I'm sure the punters are loving it. I had my next question actually. We've probably already covered. I'll ask it anyway, and there might be something else we can touch on. But it was basically, what specific ways does this new chainsaw improve safety for the operator? But you've talked about lower gyro forces already. You've talked about this saw having the lowest vibrations ever recorded for any chainsaw with Husqvarna. Yep. So I guess for me, those are two big ticket items there already. But are there other specific ways that it improves safety for the operator?
Yeah, those are probably the two advancements. But also what I touched on too is that the slim body design, the smooth body design, because all those tie into reducing fatigue. In our industry, fatigue is the leading cause of injury. People get tired, they take shortcuts, and then they get hurt. You get a little bit of that muscle fatigue, and you drop the saw onto your left leg. I mean, it's one of the leading injuries. You start taking shortcuts, putting your hand out there to do something, and next thing you know, you got the saw in the back of your hand. So our chase for safety is really our chase for what can we do on the saw to reduce fatigue. And we mentioned those that you just re-mentioned. Absolutely. The smooth body design helps you move the saw so you don't get stuck on things, which again, all these little things reduce fatigue. Adding to it would be some of our classic DNA stuff, which is low center of gravity, reduced gyro forces. You talked about that, but also the handle design as well around that. We have the 7-degree offset handle, which is just always going to be there. It's part of how we design all of our chainsaws. 7-degree offset is exactly the wrist angle that your hand or your arm has when you're using the saw, so that you don't have to bend the wrist too much. So it keeps an ergonomic posture when you're using the saw. But other than that, I mean, I think that's we hit on the main topics. It's all about how do we reduce fatigue, for our customers.
Excellent. I guess next question. In fact, I think this is my second last question, just around the 564 particularly. Would you say this new fuel injected saw is a historical milestone for Husqvarna?
Yes, I would expect that it's going to be sitting in the museum one day, that we have here. It better be. I think it is one of our big ones, probably maybe the biggest one in the 2020s. I think about our history in decades. You've got 1970s. We invented the chain brake. We brought that to market. 1980s and 90s, really, you get the air injection system, which we brought to this industry. You have our low vibe features, which the 2-mass principle, where we isolated the engine and the cutting equipment from the handles. They're really 2 masses. So we innovated, in those spaces in the 80s and 90s. Getting into the 2000s, you had auto tune, X-Torque engine. So we kind of had that block there. The 2010s was a big focus on the battery, leap that we made. And so I think I think personally, maybe I'm biased, that we produced the best battery chainsaws in the world, all from all that work that was done, a decade ago. And as we move into 2020, we of course continue the battery development as we just talked about. But I think we've got some new energy back on the petrol side, on the internal combustion engine side. It's more and more clear every day that, and then we actually say it in our strategy work, we're going to be, the last company standing in petrol and internal combustion engine. And we're going to continue developing and advancing in this space. And from that to now use LPFI as kind of the springboard, and all the advancements of the saw to springboard us into the future, the later part of the 2020s and even the 2030s, with more fuel efficient, more lower emission engines and things like that. It's a milestone marker, and I think there's more to come even as we look into some new technologies in the internal combustion engine space.
Well, I think hearing you say that petrol's here to stay, I think that will make some hearts sing in this industry. There's certainly a lot of people that haven't transitioned to battery and love their petrol products for good reason. So I think that will put some smiles on some dials for sure.
Yeah, I love all my products. I love all my toys, all my children, and if battery's right for you and right for the application, then all for it. And in some cases, the energy density of battery, it isn't quite there yet. And so we have to provide an alternate solution. The question is, how do we make the most sustainable product without sacrificing, the needs of the customer and the needs of our shareholders and our company, no matter what technology we use. I think that's the challenge, and we're challenging ourselves in both of those technologies to move forward in a good, responsible way.
Couldn't agree more. Well, I know arborists will love this saw. So the industry I work in is arboriculture, so I know tree workers are going to be all over this saw. But what about professional loggers and firewood getters? We still have logging in Australia, albeit a reduced industry, and we do have a lot of firewood getters, particularly where I'm from in Tasmania. Do you think the 564 XP will meet their needs as well?
Depends. Yeah, and I know it's a soft answer to your question, but it really depends on the customer. I've learned, you know, as I mentioned, the design is trying to get that best all-around package for tree care, landowner, and forestry. But if I go into the west coast of the U.S., this is not a logging saw. You know, but if I'm on the east coast of the U.S., it's definitely a tree care saw. But in the Nordics and most of Europe, this is not a tree care saw. Yeah, but if I go into Eastern Europe, it's a forestry saw. You know, so it just depends, on the particular customer's needs and what size of wood, what type of wood they're using, and what's right, for them. Back to my previous comment about battery, maybe there's some forestry or firewood cutters that actually are going to make the leap to battery, instead of going this route. So the answer is kind of yes, but I mean, yes, it can fit a lot of needs of the logging community in the right applications and the right trees and the right needs, and the firewood cutters, absolutely, if that's what's right for them. But it's a large mount bar with a 3/8 chain, so which is pretty typical for most of the needs of a logging and firewood cutting around the world. So I'm sure there's a lot of those folks that'll be really happy with the saw if that's what they want.
Indeed, indeed. Well, I've just got a couple more questions about both saws. What kind of maintenance and service support will be available to the end user? I'm assuming the usual channels, dealers, fleet services.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, dealers first and foremost. I mean, I have a heart for our dealers. I have a heart for tree. Well, I have a heart for our customers in general, but I have a special place in my heart for our dealers and our tree care customers. So yes, the dealers are the front line. They take a lot of lumps, for us, and I have all the respect in the world for how they're kind of facing the customers and facing the problems that we may have every day. So they're there for you. But stepping back, of course, we've got our local tech support teams. We got our factory tech support teams. Fleets, you mentioned, how fleet, if a company wants to bring fleet services in, then you get a read on diagnostics, on better ways of maintaining the product, on usage rates and things like that, which can help. And then, of course, we've got our service hub, Husqvarna Service Hub, which I mentioned a little bit earlier. That's been modified not only for LPFI, but just in general. We got some new features to it that can really help our dealers diagnose more specifically through software, through a computer diagnostic program. What's really going on with the not only the chainsaw, but all of our products it can tap into. So from the frontline dealers to back end, computer diagnostics, I think we've got a pretty good menu to choose from on how you can take care of the product.
Definitely covered that off. And just in terms of distribution, how does Husqvarna plan to distribute these saws or these two new models globally? So I'm particularly keen to know about the Southern Hemisphere in terms of Australia and New Zealand. So when will we see them in showrooms in Australia and New Zealand?
Yeah, the planning right now, of course, it will roll out across the world in different phases. I wish we could launch everywhere all at once, but unfortunately it doesn't. The factory only produces so many a day. But the B540, if we go back to the battery products, the B540 battery is going to be a little bit earlier than the saw. I think if I have my information right, I think in Q3, you'll start to see the battery in the Pacific region. And then both of the saws will start to get into the market at the turn of the year. So let's say, by Q1 of 2026, both our 564 XP and our 550 IXP should be well on market at that time. So we're only some months away.
Indeed, literally. And how time is flying. Well, that's good to know. So we can look forward to Q1. So summertime in the Southern Hemisphere, which is great. Having used both of these saws myself, basically I feel like I've got a much better or much more thorough understanding of these models, thanks to you, Gent. It was very thorough. And I think it's fair to say Husqvarna is constantly redefining our chainsaw standards in the arb industry. These two new-to-market chainsaws launched by Husqvarna set a new benchmark for tree care professionals. But I'm actually keen to know what you think. So let's have a look at some of your questions, and hopefully we can keep Gent on the line and see if we can get some answers for you. So just also welcome everyone. Thank you so much for using the chat space there. It's great to see so many different places represented, and appreciate you introducing yourself. We've got a question here from Paul Gent, battery life as in amount of recharges. So I guess he's the question is whether or not how many times can you recharge, let's say the 330 or the 540, and I'm assuming that'll be a standard spec thing, but how many recharges would you get out of a 540, for instance, for the 550 battery, for the 550i?
Yeah, it's actually an impossible question to answer. Sorry to say, but it's like how long is a string, type of question, and sorry that I don't have a specific answer for you, but it really depends on how the battery's been used over its life cycle. Really hard use, a lot of charges all the time in very cold climates is going to be very difficult or very different than warmer climates. If you fully deplete the battery before you charge every time, like a landscape company might do, they fully deplete, they charge at night, fully deplete, charge at night. That's actually healthier than if you only half deplete the battery, and then you're always kind of charging on half depletion. And there's 100 other ways, so very, very difficult to answer. So I'll just say as much as we can possibly get.
Absolutely. I guess it's if you take care of your battery and you follow the operator's manual, you'll probably get the best out of it. So that's probably
perfect answer. I should have gone with that. Yeah.
No. I think it's totally relevant. There's a couple more questions here from Kurt and Pearson. Kurt asks how the battery operates in hot temperatures in addition to charging. And Pearson is asking, how is the difference in performance in the cold conditions? So we've got black and white there. So how does the battery operate in hot temperatures, and what's the performance in cold conditions?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier about the graphical display, and one of the reasons, the big points on that is the operator can really understand if they're in really hot conditions what kind of stress the motor is getting into or the battery is getting into. But so that you can take a step back if you're starting to get overheating in the battery. With that being said, testing against a lot of our competitors, I'm happy to say that I think we've got the best setup right now with how we've designed the through body battery and how we move the air from the intake across the battery itself. I think there was actually an image earlier that showed how the air moves from the chainsaw into the battery box, across the cells, and then out the top. And that dynamic airflow is extremely important to keeping the battery cool. So I think we actually do a much better job there. We also move, we're one of the companies, and there's not all of them do this, but in the charging process, actually move air through the charger so that we can keep the whole system cooler so it charges faster as well. On the cold side, it's very difficult to keep the running and the charge going, and also to charge it back up again in a very cold environment. It's actually one of the limitations of battery. So if you're in extreme cold conditions, I'm talking about operating in sub-freezing temperatures, then your battery life is going to be a little bit less, for sure. Still with you?
Oh, there I am. Sorry about that.
Okay.
We've just got quite a few questions there, so I'm hoping we can get to a few more. We're looking for a price for the 564. So the price points for both saws haven't been decided yet, but the recommended retail price will be applicable to where they actually sit in the range. But final pricing hasn't been set at this point. So look, stay tuned to the Husky website for further details in Australia and New Zealand, of course. So just stay abreast of that, or jump on and use your email to get updates from Husqvarna. I think that's the way to go. The weight compared to the 550 XP. So that's from Sam. I think that might be in terms of the 550i. So what's the weight compared to the petrol equivalent?
Oh, yeah, I don't have it in my head. I mean, I actually kind of prepared myself before coming into this on reminding myself of what the weight of the 550i is, and it's a 6 kilogram total system. 6 kilograms with the 330 battery, 7 kilograms with the 540 battery, total system weight.
Yep.
But actually, I don't have in my head the 550 petrol. I'd have to look it up. I must be honest.
I think it's just under 6 from memory, but I'm the same. I don't have that exact number. But certainly it will be in the ballpark with the option to have the 330 battery or the 540. So increasing power or having the weight as a preferred option. And obviously runtime is different there as well. So you'll see a bit more about that as we go along, and certainly by Q1, all that information should be available.
Somebody helped us out. 5.3 kilograms in the 550
There we go.
XP.
Yep. So
Thank you, Paul.
it's a bit more, but certainly we're looking at the big battery, the 330 and the 540 there. So I think great for blocking down, great for groundwork. I think it's going to actually meet those needs really well. There's a question about warranty. I imagine the warranty would be the same as all Husqvarna warranties.
Yeah, a local decision. So I'll have to defer to the local team there on how they want to play the warranty. Mm-hmm.
That's from David. Thank you, David. And Ryan has asked the recommended size of bar for the saw. I'm assuming he's referring to the 564 there, and I think it's you might have that there, Gent. 20.
Yeah, first and foremost, large mount. So we have a large mount bar system, so you can put larger bars on it. You know, back to if you want to go into that forestry space, and then designed for 3/8 chain. So like our C83, C85 chain, and it's really designed around that chain setup. So a 24 inch bar setup, 3/8 chains, C83, C85, you'll be good to go.
Perfect. Let's have a look. Pre-orders, 564s in Australia. Probably you won't know that.
No,
but I imagine
again, no, yeah, local question there. I have to defer that to the local team.
So that's from Paul. Paul, check in with your local dealer. They'll be able to give you a bit of an idea of when you can pre-order it. Let's have another look. I'm sorry if I'm missing questions here. There's quite a few. Lots of praise for the saw. Can't wait to see it. Great. There's lots and lots of questions here. Fuel pressure. What fuel pressure will the 564 run at? That's from Colby. I'm not sure if we know that, but what do you think, Gent?
No, I'd have to call a friend in my engineering community to get that question answered. So I'm sorry, not what's on top of mind today.
Okay, Nick, we've got a question from Nick about the battery charge. How long is the battery charge going to last, and will there be an option to charge in the field without the use of inverter? We do have a battery box. If you've got a power point, if you're in an urban situation, even a semi-urban situation, you can plug the box in and you've got 4 charging options. It's an excellent tool. Have a look at that on the website. That might help you out if you've got power. Maximum RPM of the 564 from Hayden.
Yeah, another good question. All these detailed questions. You're gonna have to.
I knew it.
Yeah.
And
you're testing me. I should have called in one of my engineers to sit behind me over here, so they have all these at their fingertips. I'd have to look it up. I'm sorry.
Hayden, if we can't get that information to you now, we'll get back to you on that. So we'll send you a message about that.
It'll be in the specifications. Yeah.
It will for sure. And lots of questions about recommended retail. So final pricing hasn't been set. Just stay tuned. It will be set as soon as we can set it. Will the 550 IXP and the B540X be available in Australia? Yes, is the answer to that. Maybe also check the website now. If it's not currently listed there, I'm sure it will be listed soon. Thanks, Carl. He's left, which is great. Great answer. Thank you. Lots of praise, et cetera, et cetera. There we go. Thanks to Paul for the 5.3 kilos on the 550. I think that's about it. Will the new batteries work with the older model battery saws, from Sam?
Yes, good question. And the answer is yes.
There you go, Sam. So,
Backward compatible. Yeah.
there we go.
There's some products in like the residential small, homeowner range where it'll be it won't be able to hook up, but anything in the professional space or the landowner space, no problem.
Last question from Lewis, who I think is joining us from Tasmania. Will the performance drop on the battery saw if we're using older generation batteries? So if we chuck a 200X in it, first of all, will the saw work? And secondly, will the performance drop on the 550 IXP?
Yeah, the answer is yes, you can use it. It's not really a performance. Maybe I'm being too technical here. It's not a performance drop, but it won't be the same performance, of course, as the 550 or the 330 because it's a totally different battery anyway. So you are going to get a little bit less power output if you're using, say, a 200X versus a 540, for sure. Yeah, but they definitely will work for sure. Yes.
Thank you so much, Gent. Well, that's kind of hopefully most of the questions there, and that's about all we have time for. We've gone over time, in fact. So thank you again, Gent Simmons, for your insight into Husqvarna and for all the deets on these new chainsaws. We really appreciate your time.
Not a problem at all. And the first thing I'm going to do after getting off of this call is go look up the RPM. I'm embarrassed I don't have that in my head. So sorry about that one. But anyway, it was fun. I enjoyed it. And I really appreciate all that you do, Kiah, and everybody that's on the call here. Again, my heart goes out to our dealers and our tree care community here. You've inspired me a lot over the years, and everything that I do is in leading this R&D organization. I really do it as best I can for you. So so thank you for inviting me here today.
Thank you so much, and we're very grateful. And also thank you to Cassie Ringstead and the Husqvarna marketing team who've been producing for us in the background this evening. And of course, to every one of you for watching. We really do appreciate your time and participation and some of those great questions as well. If you've been inspired by this chat with Gent and want to know more about Husqvarna, the products they offer, or in particular, the new fuel-injected 564 XP or the 550i XP, get in touch with your local Husqvarna dealer or visit husqvarna.com.au or the relevant website in New Zealand. Thank you again for joining us today. I'll leave you with a couple of short videos showcasing the features of the two new Husqvarna saws. They're basically about 4 minutes, so hang around for those. Designed to perform and built to last. I'm Kiah Martin, the climate correspondent, and that's time.